I hope so. I hope I got the microphone. All right, I think we're in business. Okay, so you and Doug, and then you two, and then you two. Perfect. Okay, so what we'll do, all right, is we'll get through an assessment on each other. Let's try to do that as quick as we can, all right? And then what we'll do is we'll kind of come back and we'll talk about one pattern that we want to kind of try to change, all right? And then we'll figure out what can we potentially pick, maybe 2 exercises to try to change it, and then we'll retest it, and then we'll look at it kind of where it goes into a programming template. I drew this horrible picture up on the whiteboard just to give us some ideas when we start to look at what we're actually going to try to influence on some of these things. This kind of helps a little bit to be all right, if I'm looking for internal, external rotation at the shoulder, I need to influence kind of this space here. If I'm looking for overhead flexion, I kind of need to influence this space up here, all right? And we may have to pick some of that stuff. And then the propulsion arc is a way just to give us more information is how would we make this super easy? Remember with Jen, right, we wanted everything down here, right? There's no way she's going to be able to go in mid-propulsion because it's going to bring her up into impingement or internal rotation, which is for giving her shoulder a bunch of issues, all right? So we'll kind of go through some of that stuff. And again, we'll play around with things and see how it works, okay? So go ahead, let's get on the ground and let's start our assessment stuff. Beth, what's up?
Hey, how we doing?
What is it, cold out?
I'm finding it adjusted. Everything was negative, right? So I don't even have to do
Oh, no, that was the best burn. All right. So, Beth, do you have your old assessment? No. Okay, let me get you a sheet. No, I didn't. I didn't. It is.
Assessor or assessee?
You're good. All right. So here's what we're going to do. You guys are on that pad?
Yeah.
All right, Beth, we'll come over here. So, guys, if you just have a question or anything, just let me know and I can come over and help. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to assess, all right? And actually, you're going to assess me.
Okay.
And then we're going to pick one pattern to change, then figure out what exercises we're going to try to change it with, and then do the exercise, retest, and see what happens.
Okay.
Okay? So, I'm all yours. Oh, yeah. Be gentle with me.
All right. I needed a practice. All right. You don't mind doing
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So let's start with okay. So we're doing your hip flexion. So I'm just gonna bend your leg here. So
Yeah, yeah.
straighten it out here. I'm just gonna push this with your chest. All right. So that's pretty good.
Feels good.
Yeah. And nothing hurts or anything like that.
Nope.
Do that. Okay. Perfect.
Nope.
Right. So now, so this one I take this way, right?
So what, you're going for external rotation?
Yep.
Okay. So just be careful. Don't turn the whole. Yeah. So just kind of think about spinning it in its socket. You got it.
Yeah.
A little limited, right?
A little bit. You should probably go another 5 years, right?
So we want to see. It doesn't have to be parallel, right? So it doesn't have to be parallel with the pelvis, but it should be probably close to 60, 65, right? So I would say it's So then I'm off a little bit.
Okay. So you're negative on the external.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna rotate it in.
Correct. Yeah.
Wait, this one direction I hold underneath.
So well, I would hold it right here and then turn the foot out. Yep.
Yeah, same thing, limited.
Yep.
All right. So those are
All right, and I will say I felt a little pressure on the inside of my hip. Didn't hurt, but it felt pressure. It wasn't like on there. It just felt all right, that's the end range. When you kind of went there, I was like, ooh, I get a little inside groin stuff.
tight or?
I would say it's not. You could say tightness. I would say it's pretty close to if you really pushed it, it'd probably be pain.
Okay.
Okay.
Almost like a top or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it just does not. It's don't do that anymore. Okay, so I switched them around, right?
Okay.
So flexion first, right? I would say we were good, right?
For right.
Yeah, so give it a plus. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, and then hip, ER, and IR. So this is going to be ER. So we were missing a little bit of that, so give it a minus. All right, over there, yep, we were missing that. Good.
Okay.
All right, so either if we're going to stay on the right leg, we'll do the active straight leg raise. All right. So no, it's just, I'll do it. Right, you just watch it. Right, just make sure everything stays straight. Yeah, so that's good. As long as we're close to 90, we're pretty good.
So this is a straight leg.
Correct.
Okay. And then your abduction.
So if you want, I can roll on my side now and do that, or you can do the left side. What would you want to do? Okay. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I'm feeling a little pressure in my back. All right. But it gets there, right? It doesn't feel restricted. It just I can feel it. A little bit, yeah. So this is IR.
Same kind of tightness. Do you feel this anywhere when I do this?
Again, a little bit of pressure on the inside of my groin, but that feels easier to get out further than the other side. Yeah. External, yeah. And what do you feel there?
Do you feel any pain anywhere?
No. It is
Nothing in the lower back? Okay. I feel like kind of
on these both.
yeah.
Yeah. I would agree.
So you have the positive there, but same thing in your left or negative. Into your straight leg, yes.
Yeah. So let's do this. I mean, does it look pretty straight up and down? It's not like out here, right?
No, yeah,
so
right
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so at least you're like symmetrical.
Yep. Well, so let's say this too. I just did a lower body lift today. That was very hard.
All tight?
Yeah.
I feel like that's still really good for
So like things don't feel like. But I'm like, holy crap! I finished my lift today. And I was just like, I want to take a nap. I don't want to do anything else. All right. So let's do, since we're here, let's do our abduction and adduction. All right. So I'll go on this side. Yeah, give me 1 second and I'll come over. So come on this side, all right? So what you're going to do is you got to make sure that this hip stays stacked over the other one. So don't let it roll back, all right? So you can actually put your thigh right up against, yeah, so that kind of gives you a brace. You're going to grab this leg. Yep, you're going to kind of bring it up, all right? And then, and then you're kind of just give it, you're going to scour a little bit, like just kind of get me to loosen up. And then you're going to bring it back and behind me. So bring it back, yep. This way, yeah, and again, you want to make sure that this doesn't move. Yeah, and then see if it can drop down to the floor. All right, and does it go forward or does it kind of go straight down?
You have to go forward when you get down.
All right, so as long as it's not like hanging like this, and as long as it doesn't do this, so that's probably pretty good. All right, and then you got to do abduction. So you straighten the leg out, keep this in one spot, and then just lift the foot up.
How's that feel?
That's fine.
Can you go a little farther?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Good?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's pretty close.
All right, so you have a spot for
So here's abduction or adduction, right? So on the left side.
Oh, okay.
We have the left. I would say pretty good. So I'd give plus.
I would say,
all right, and then abduction on the left, I would say pretty good.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's try the right side. Yep. You got it. Yep. So does this one feel easier?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So what we
like
no restriction whatsoever, right? So what we may look at then is, all right, let's go back and maybe that left isn't as good as we thought.
Okay. Wait, is it just comparative to your
No. So like I would say like I wanted you to feel the difference before you actually like thought about it. So like now that you know what this one feels like and how much easier it is, would you then consider the other one maybe a little bit stiffer and maybe not as smooth in that position?
Yeah, I would say it's not as
So this is probably what it should feel like. I would then go back and be like, yeah, maybe the left's not as good as it should be.
Okay. And then we'll straighten this leg out.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna lift up and put down. Okay. And that's how you feeling?
That's fine. You can go higher if you want.
You good?
So as soon as you start to feel, so as soon as you start to feel this, go ahead, pull it up higher, right? You feel that? You see how it's shifted? That's me shifting my spine, right? So go up as high as you can with that foot without feeling that shift. So like that's pretty tight. I would say that's about as high as you can.
Comparative to like that one's way tighter.
Tighter than that one. All right, and that's kind of what we will typically see, which we may use this as an example of like a left AIC pattern. So then we'll go abduction minus and adduction positive, and we may put that as a negative. Maybe, yeah, just put it like, yeah, you got it. So hang on one second. All right, what do you guys got?
Well, we were curious about the adduction and abduction.
And what about
we were
it?
watching
The
you.
shoulder one as well.
Okay. Dylan, what's up?
Did you want to go assess, and then
Pick one pattern. You can, yeah, pick one and then just pause for a second. All right, so actually you can pick one.
well, we haven't both assessed.
Okay, all right, so so both assess. All right, what did you guys have questions about the abduction, adduction?
So,
Beth, come on over here real quick.
straight leg, right?
All right, so hang on. If we're looking at him already, right,
These legs need to be.
we need to be there. Okay.
Now, does it care if his back is this way or that way?
Let me pop in real quick and I'll show you. All right, so what we were talking about with Beth, right?
Yep.
I need to actually prevent this from doing something.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to typically push. Usually, the way they've always demonstrated it is people on a table, and you'll get them like if here's the table, I just kind of lean my hip into it, but we don't have a table, so we're just going to kind of put our thigh down. I'm going to grab this leg, right? I'm going to kind of say like, hey, relax, chill out, you, because like that's not. Yeah, he's obviously not, right? So if I want to kind of hold him in this position, I'm going to move the leg, and then I'm going to bring him back into extension. All right. Now, if I'm holding this hip here, Brandon, what do you feel when I pull like that?
It's starting to get tight.
Yeah. Right. He can't even get into a neutral line. All right. So I already know he can't adduct the hip because he can't even extend it. So if I go to bring him down, right, it's got to come forward to get there. Right. So that would be a minus on the adduction. Did it hurt?
No.
Okay. So if I think I'm going to take him on his abduction, I got to roll his hip again and then bring him up, right? And everything's coming up. Yeah. Right? So then, yeah. So again, it's like, no good on that either, right? What you typically have to feel, though, is what's happening, here, because as I bring this up, he can, you see, like that's him moving his pelvis. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, it goes up a little bit easier. Yeah. But if I roll him here and then stop that from moving, it's like, he wants to move that other way. Okay? So you got to fix the hip.
Over this one, is it the palm facing
Yes.
down?
Right. So I'm going to
And then hand on the.
hand on this rib. I'm going to turn the palm towards the floor and then go. Which actually, you can see right about there he wants to turn.
Yeah.
So it's actually not too bad. No, not too bad.
I gave a plus for that.
Compared to what it was last time, I couldn't go, but I had a massage since then, and they beat the crap out of my chest, so.
Good. That's a good thing to think about. All right, let's go back.
I had to sit back.
What happened?
I'm starting just to link between what's going on in my back, so what's going to my wrist. So he was like pinching these things, and I'm like, I feel that in my wrist so badly. So I just started to see like a specialist on it, just to like kind of work those and like show me things that I can do, because like this pain is starting to
Come back in.
I'm not going to pay for a surgery again.
What?
And I'm just doing like inflammatory dieting. So fun times. All right, let's do your shoulders.
Go
now.
for it.
Okay. So can you lift your left arm here? Okay. Bend it here. I'm just gonna push here on your shoulder, and I'm gonna drop your arm and relax it. You're pretty good.
Yeah. So just let it go, right? And does it spring up?
Nope.
Nope. So you've got pretty good at ER,
Okay.
right? And remember, you want to feel this acromion process spot, right? Because what you'll typically feel is like, so you'll feel it in my IR, is this thing will do this. And as soon as you start to feel that, stop it,
Okay.
right? So if I'm going for ER and it kind of starts to roll up somehow, that's what you're searching for.
Okay. So you said you're just saying
Yeah, this one's going to feel it.
it's like right there.
Yeah.
It says lifting up.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then you're not even going. You're like resisting it. Right?
So go do that one again real quick, because this will be a good one to compare to the other side. So
Okay.
right about there,
Yeah.
right? So that's actually pretty good. I would say IR is pretty good.
Okay.
All right, ER and IR on my left shoulder is good.
All right. And the left shoulder.
Right, so yep.
So positive.
Yep.
Okay.
Good. So you can do abduction. All right, so that's when we bring across our nose, right? You're going to hold the shoulder kind of in place and then just see if the humerus can kind of come across.
Okay. Is this a straight arm or bent?
No, you can keep it bent.
Okay.
Yep.
And bend your arm, we're going to pull it across. So this is good. Yeah.
Yep.
So if your elbow...
Crosses the, so think about, I'm going to keep this here. I would say that's as far as I've got, all right? But that's still right where we need to be, okay? So just be careful you don't drag the whole shoulder with, and roll the rib cage off the floor.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Overhead flexion.
Yep. Okay.
So that's this one, right? You're gonna hold the rib in position, yeah, and then turn the wrist this way, yep, and then go overhead.
Watching that elbow to see if it
Correct.
starts to roll out now.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah.
And is this kind of close to my ear?
You can get a little closer.
So like in line? Is it in line with my ear? I can say. All right. So that's probably that's pretty good overhead flexion.
It's a little bit above, but not.
Not so. Again, you could put like a plus minus. Yeah. Denise, Elisa, how you guys doing over there? Okay. Good. We already did the abduction. That one's off a table. We won't do that one for now.
And which one's this one again?
That's the overhead flexion. So that's that one. Oh, so you mean the you mean the infrasternal?
Oh, the white. Okay,
infrasternal. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
So
So I'll do your other side first.
Yeah.
Okay. Bend the elbow. Okay. Draw this down.
Because as soon as you start to go
That's
one,
good.
Good.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's same on. Lower this to the floor. This is definitely a little bit tighter than the other.
Correct. Usually, that's usually the case.
Okay. So I would say, and then
Guys, let's try to wrap this up in the next 2 minutes. Yep. Yep.
and you're already starting to roll. And you're, yeah. That was good. Okay. And then do
You got to come across the body.
cross. Pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would say you're good.
Start right away. We got a couple.
All right, let me. Beth's just got to check an infrasternal angle, and then we'll be good.
Right?
Right.
And I want you to take a deep breath.
So remember, you got to get your hands.
Put your finger like right underneath.
So you're gonna find the outline of the rib cage. Okay. So get your fingers in there.
Yep.
All right. Right off the bat, is this angle smaller than 90 degrees?
Yeah.
All right. So then you feel my ribs come up a little bit, right? So there's this, and then right about there you see them start to come up just a hair.
Yeah.
So now hold your yeah. So it's just a little bit. Now you ready?
All right.
So does it open and close?
Yes.
Then it's dynamic. And if it's closer than 90 degrees, it's a narrow.
Answers ready?
So that's the infrasternal angle,
Yep.
right? So narrow. All right.
So you started as narrow.
Yep. So just check it. Yep. And plus if it's dynamic, which it was.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
All right, ladies, what do you got for questions?
Did you do the hip abduction on her?
Yes.
It seems, I mean, she has no abduction.
Yes.
Can't drop at all.
Okay.
But she doesn't have any pain.
Okay.
But it's nothing like what I'm seeing.
Okay.
So I'm like, I don't know how high it should
So
be. I
we've
can't
got
remember.
her hips stacked, right? I'm gonna hold it in place. I'm
Yep.
gonna move her leg for her so she can
Yep.
relax, and then I'm gonna bring it back into extension,
Yep.
right? And right off the bat, we can see her back arch a little
Yep.
bit. So we know that she's probably not gonna be able to adduct, which
Right.
she can't.
Right.
Okay. And then I'm gonna again roll the hip forward, hold it there, and she can't abduct either.
Okay.
Right? Like,
That's
what do you feel when I do that, Denise?
Because I thought it was good, and then
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I got to the second side, I'm like, I don't know. I think it's a little.
It feels really stiff. Yeah. It's a little self-assessment over here.
Assessing myself.
So let's see what we
This is
got.
already-
So relax the shoulder. Right. So we'll go here. That's about it for IR.
Yeah, which isn't great.
Nope.
Yep.
Pretty good. That's good. And that, again, it's not bad, all right?
Yeah.
But you have no internal rotation there. All right, so Brandon, relax. You can fix her up. You can try something on her in a second. On the other side. All right. So let's so if we were going to pick one pattern for me, which one would we want to try and change? So look at your sheets, pick one pattern for the person you assessed.
So probably your fifth, right?
What would you go for, you think? Like IR or ER on both?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my first thought too. Yeah. All right. So you guys got one?
On the shoulders.
So pick one. So Noel, you got one for Brandon?
Yeah.
Correct. We're picking one. So here's something I would suggest. All right. Pick something that isn't painful. Okay. So if there's a dysfunctional pattern that isn't painful, pick that one. If there's one that's painful, stay the heck away from it. Okay. So like I'll give you a quick example. On mine, Beth found that I actually had like really good hip flexion, but it's giving me some pressure in my low back, and I didn't like it. All right. I had limited external rotation on both sides and limited internal rotation on both sides. The IR on both sides gave me a little pressure that I wasn't super fond of. So if we were probably going to pick one, we'd probably go with the ER at the hip because it doesn't hurt and it's a dysfunctional pattern that we can probably change that might help the other stuff. If I recapture external rotation, I can probably get more IR back because there's more room to do so. All right. So that would be the first thing. So what do you got for Elisa? Internal rotation of the shoulder? Yes. All right. Denise, Lisa, what do you got for Denise?
Let's work on hip abduction and adduction.
Okay. Pick one, adduction or abduction.
What would you normally do?
So what's her infrasternal angle?
Wide.
Wide. So then I would probably go after abduction.
Okay.
All right. Doug, what do you got for Dylan? All right.
So like there's a couple of things that I know we only have so much time. Just comments you made, like you were like, okay, if we get some external rotation, we're also going to get more internal rotation.
Potentially.
Like, okay, potentially. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if everybody else is in the same boat. The other thing, like when you just said she's got a wide ISA, so because of that you're going
after abduction. I'll explain it all in 2 seconds. Let's get it on the board. What do you got for Doug?
I'd put adduction again for him.
For what?
Adduction.
All right. We didn't do Beth, but Beth is going to go after right shoulder IR. Noel, what do you got for Brandon?
Hip IR.
On both?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. All right. There is no script to go by. What we can do is we can take some of the stuff that we might know. So this is a mistake I made right at the very beginning of learning some of this stuff. Was like I thought it was like, hey, you got to follow this process. All it is it's a map that then you can kind of draw where you want to go. That might be the quickest path to get there. It may not end up being there. So why did we pick abduction for Denise, who's a wide ISA? Because a wide is associated with an inhalation state.
Okay.
Abduction is also inhalation. She's biased towards that. We might be able to go after that and get it quickly. Okay. In terms of if I recapture external rotation, so if here's my arc, right? Here's full IR and here's full ER. If I'm missing that, right? I really actually, in my neutrals here, I really actually don't have a ton of IR to play with, right? It kind of still gets split. So if I can open this back up, it brings me back to that point, and I can come back to a lot more internal rotation.
Okay, so it reorients me.
Yes, right? And that's ultimately, we're always thinking of if I have a compensatory strategy, right? So maybe somebody that stands like this, it serves a purpose. It limits options, right? So if I really want to put a lot of force into the ground, or if I'm a power lifter and I've got this kind of position, I can probably do it really well. It just means I'm going to have zero internal rotation of most things because there's just no place for it to go. right? And eventually it might come at a cost, which is like, man, my hips feel like crap or my back hurts. But until that happens, it's still a useful strategy, right? So if we're looking at these things, again, I'll use myself as an example. When we're looking at like hip internal external rotation, we're going to typically look at something that is going to help influence from the outer part of like the hip trochanter like down a little bit. So I'm thinking like more like kind of something that would be influencing my like glutes and like adductors and stuff like that. If I'm looking at hip flexion and extension, I probably need to be looking more at the pelvis above here to change, right? Because if like, so an example is like Beth tested my hip flexion and I pulled it in and what I actually felt was like pressure up here. It's because this stuff on the backside probably can't expand. So now it's getting dragged or it's getting yanked on as I pull that femur all the way across. If I restore that, does it mean I'll get my hip internal rotation back? Maybe, maybe not, right? But it'll at least maybe I'm in the right area to restore it if I'm doing maybe something like a weighted toe touch, right? Or something that I can get my mid to upper back to expand as well. Whereas if I'm trying to restore some of these internal, external rotation measures, I kind of want to look maybe down the chain, maybe even as far down as like the ankle, okay? So that was just some things to think about. So what I want you to think about is if I'm trying to restore shoulder IR, I need something that's going to expand my sternum, right, in this space here. That might look like a cable chest fly. That might look like, in some cases, one that we like to use is this kind of like position here where I can expand on the backside and get that front side to get a good breath and feel the chest expand and then come back down,
okay,
right?
Even if everything else is showing expansion bias?
What do you mean?
On the chest?
Yeah.
Like, that's the only one, but everything else is showing in a wide ISA.
So why would we still need to expand that?
Yeah.
Right? So here's the thing is, she could, and this is something Dylan and I were talking about earlier, what you might sometimes need is a little more compression someplace else. So if I were to, this is a good example of this. If I pinch my shoulder blades back and hard, right, the only place for air to go is forward. So I'm going to have to go, and you can see I can get my chest to inflate. The only thing, though, is it's really hard to get that pump handle then to come back down, right? And what we should have is this kind of like nice, but I need both sides to do that. So what's interesting is like I don't have a ton of exercises that really help restore internal rotation. I really like a bent over cable fly because it makes it really easy to keep an upper back big and I can still expand on the front side. It's harder to do it on the bench because I've got the bench pushing into my upper back, which sometimes pushes it forward too much. If I'm using a heavy weight...
Do I need expansion there in the back too?
You might. You might. I don't know. Right? If all other measures are good, then you probably need some compression on the backside and maybe something pulling you forward. I don't know. Here's the thing is, if for you specifically, right, you just may need a little bit more compression overall, right, to kind of get you something to then be able to fix off of and then pump. All right. The hard part is like sometimes we are robbing one thing to get another, right? It doesn't work so well. So a perfect example would be like, all right, if I'm missing internal rotation and maybe hip flexion, and I go after a deep squat with a heel elevated thing, I get that hip flexion pretty well, but maybe like it comes at the cost of me using some other strategy to get down there because I don't have the internal rotation. It may cause like discomfort, or maybe like it may not change anything. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what layer to go after first. Okay, so here's the cool part. Like it doesn't matter though. Pick whatever you want, try it. We'll retest it and see what happens. Right? So for people that have an IR shoulder, right? What we might do is maybe try to go to that bent over cable fly position. You can try a supine cable fly. The hard part, the other thing I was going to say about this, if I use a heavy weight, I have to be able to compress to get it back up, right? So it might rob us of something to kind of get there. And that's why like lifters, like heavy lifters, are always going to have compression on both sides, right? They have a ton of it because that's how you move heavy stuff. You can't have this like, I can't have a hip that just blows out the back side and then is really tight in the front and expect to get myself up out of the hole, right? I need the propulsive strategy to get back out of it, so I've got to have tightness on both sides, which we saw in mind today because I just did a heavy leg workout earlier, and like I don't have any internal rotation and I don't have any external rotation on either side, on both of them, right? So just keep that in mind. In some cases, we may not have it just on one side or the other. It's kind of be like, well, this is a strategy we need to have in order to do some of the stuff we want to do, okay? So hip adduction, right? So hip adduction is associated with internal rotation and compression. I have to be able to drop this femur across the body, which means I need to be able to probably expand up here and back here. All right? We were talking about this earlier. You could go after internal rotation and play with something like that, right? So if that was an SSLDL, one other thing that we worked really well, if we're looking at it from this mid-propulsion arc, which is typically where we get, you can see it right here, extension, adduction, internal rotation, dorsiflexion, pronation, anything that's going to bring her femur up into this like range of motion is going to promote that position. All right? So you can pick all kinds of stuff. It could still be a split squat. If we really wanted to bias her towards it, I might give her a toe lift, bring her foot up here, and just say go down and hold that position, and she's going to automatically have to internally rotate and adduct the femur a little bit. And as long as she can breathe and do stuff there, she'll probably recapture it sometimes. All right? So the early, mid, and late propulsion is just another thing we can kind of stack on top of this to give us a range to kind of work with. Right? Most people are going to do really well with an early propulsive position just because it requires really it's just like here. Right? So if I, like with Jen the other day, she had trouble in her shoulder that didn't like internal rotation. She couldn't actually turn her arm really at all. Anything that brought her up here gave her pain. So what we did was, the first thing we tried was just a kind of a farmer's carry. Right? Remember like the stuff that we did? She didn't really like that. We tried just rotating it under load to see what would happen. She didn't like that. Then we got her here, and we did some tricep inhalation and exhalation on both sides, and all of a sudden she could turn it without really any pain, and she said she felt better the next day, mainly because we started in a very early propulsive state. Right? So it was biasing some external rotation. She could stay there. She didn't really have too many demands on it. All right? So there's no bad exercises. Right? Pick whatever you want to try, coach it up, and then we'll come back and retest it and see what we got. All right?
So, question for you about like that early mid-propulsion, late propulsion.
Yeah.
I sort of get it with the foot in the lower body.
Yes.
Where is that?
In the arm?
Yeah.
Early, mid, late.
Okay, that's what I thought.
All right. So, hey, guys, just Doug had a good question. So Doug had a good question about the early, mid, and late, right? So this is early propulsion. This would be mid propulsion. This would be late propulsion, right? This would be early propulsion, mid propulsion, late propulsion, right? So stuff overhead is obviously much harder than it is down by here, right? So ultimately, if I'm thinking, like, how do I make it as easy as possible for someone to recapture something, maybe in their shoulder, anything down here is going to be way easier than getting them up overhead, especially if they're missing overhead flexion or internal and external rotation. All right, so just keep that in mind. Like, I don't want to, if someone's missing overhead flexion, I might not want to go right to something like this. I might need to get them something where they can get here and recapture something, or maybe down here and recapture something, or at an angle maybe like at like 60 or something like that. It doesn't always have to be right in the position that they're needing to get more of. Okay? All right, let's play with this stuff. Again, just pick something and then try it. Yeah.
So internal rotation on his hip.
Yes.
So
Beth, come on over here because we're gonna.
Like a quadruped position.
What's his
He's wide.
infrastructure? So wide. So quadruped, you're gonna typically want to go sideline. Okay. So if I've got compression here, it's gonna push my ribs out. All right.
Okay.
So if I put him in all fours, it's still going to give him the front to back compression.
Yep.
All right. So sideline, I can usually compress on one side, right, and still be able to breathe on the other. All right. So if you're going to try to recapture hip IR, what we can do is maybe something like the one we used to do, your right sideline adductor pullback. Do you remember that one?
Sure.
So Van, line your right side.
I remember that one. I didn't love it. It was.
You did love it because it helped your knee tremendously. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
90, right?
Yeah. And then we need Correct. We would need something to put him a little bit.
Clamshell progression.
Nope. So he's going to be here.
And then you're gonna tuck the bottom knee
So
in,
we're going to,
right?
all right, so the first thing we have to be able to do, yeah, is we have to be able to hip shift, right? So what we got to do is we got to take this hip back behind, so just let it relax for a second, behind the right knee. So now she's in her left hip. And then she's just going to squeeze her left knee down a little bit, right? She should feel her left inner thigh and maybe her left outer hip, okay? So what we've done is we've now shifted this out the back.
Oh, it's gonna start cramping.
Yeah, and we've gotten our left inner thigh to do what it's supposed to. Now, if you breathe, we should be good. Now, there's two things we can still add to this that might give us a little bit more. So, like, obviously, that's a little bit of IR.
Right.
That's a lot more.
Yep.
Okay. I can take this arm, and I can reach it out. Okay. So now I can get her to push this back, let her head relax. So put your head down. Yeah. All right. And I can let this kind of pull this hip back, reach this out further, and now squeeze that left knee down. And just breathe there. Right. Big inhale, big exhale. Inhale, pull this back even further. Exhale, squeeze down a little bit. Don't let it slide forward. Go one more breath there. No. What was the thing we were going to work on with her?
We didn't even get there.
Oh, that's right. We didn't get to it. All right. So, but that's working on internal rotation and adduction on the hip. Okay, so we can try something like that. Well, we're going to go after external rotation for me. All right, but that would be the first thing I might try.
Yeah.
Was his right worse than his left, or left worse than his right?
No, they were both crappy.
So try it. Right.
So
ideally, what he needs for a wide ISA is to be able to shift back and forth from side to side. Right, because right now everything is just kind of pushed forward and back. It's all bilaterally, usually stuck.
So my question is, being like a heavy lifter,
Yes.
wouldn't you want to try to stay in some part of a compressed state, or do you want to loosen some things up?
So here's the thing is, yes and no, right? That's eventually it's going to come at a cost, right? And you've had knee pain and stuff like that before, right? So you've probably lost the capacity to do some of that stuff. If you recaptured it, you can still probably lift heavy. You might have to adjust a couple things, but you just have to be aware of what's going to.
I lift heavier now than I did prior to.
Yeah. So remember, with this knee out in front, that feels different, right? Yeah. So just gotta make sure.
Isn't this the external
What do you mean?
measurement?
I mean this one.
Assessment?
This is
Yeah.
internal rotation.
Okay, you had said it different earlier. That's why I'm like super
So-
confused at what was going on. And this one was
That's an abduction. Abduction is going to be associated with external rotation.
external rotation.
Yes.
Okay, you swapped it on me earlier.
I did?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's why I'm super confused. I'm like, wait, what? Okay, that makes perfect sense. That's what I thought. Okay, so it's like, so the femur is moving away from the body.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I have abduction,
Yep.
external rotation.
Okay, then I just didn't know if you were talking about the hip moving towards the body versus out, and that's why you had switched it. Right, okay, makes sense.
Okay. So we need something to recapture hip external rotation.
Okay,
What would potentially be a thing you would go for that?
you're doing an exercise or you're doing like a stretch thing?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. Like are we looking for more mobility in that action, or are we just looking for stabilization?
No, so we're looking to recapture range of motion. All right. So, hey guys, this is something to think about. It doesn't have to be a strength exercise. It could still be a stretch. It could be a breathing exercise. Do whatever you want. All right. We just want to try to recapture range of motion. So it doesn't have to be in a specific way to do it. Just think about an exercise that might do that. So don't use the other hip. So so Noel, this is a good example of like, man, he's trying to use a lot of different stuff. Okay, so maybe get him to reach a little bit. Maybe this is too much for him at the moment, right? What you might want to just think about is, maybe passively, I'm going to just have him go here, right? Let that knee drop a little bit. Just kind of rest there. And I want you just to kind of reach your left hand out, tuck your tailbone. Yeah. So think about pushing your ribs back a little bit. There you go. Yep. And just take a couple breaths there. Right? And you might feel some stretching kind of in some of this stuff. Just let this knee keep dropping. So what do you think?
No. The two things that came to mind
Yeah.
was like, one was, I don't know if this is called like 90-90 breathing.
Okay.
Like the leg up.
Yeah.
And then the other one was, is it anything like taking your squat out of neutral position and like
So squatting.
making it wider?
Okay, so you could.
Okay.
right? So that would be like like a sumo squat type deal, okay? That would promote abduction, hip flexion, especially if I'm using like a heel lift. We could try it.
But I also don't like cause pain, so I'm trying to think. I feel like everything else is just like you like wanting to stabilize that position if you did like single leg or like I don't know if that's really.
So here's the thing is, if we come here, let's look at this real quick.
Well, this is the one that you're having the biggest issue with right now, right? Like that. We just restored it a little bit. Yeah. Well, no, the left.
So depending on, we know that if my hip flexion doesn't feel good, I probably want to stay out of this late propulsion stuff because it's going to promote flexion. It's still going to promote the stuff we want. It just might come at a cost. Like, man, my low back doesn't really like that, right? But up here, right, I can still go after the same stuff. So maybe putting my foot in some kind of like heel elevated position. We could still do like a split squat. We could still do a single leg squat. You could still do like whatever you want. You could do a stretch. Like you can pull. You can do something like that. You could like whatever you think works. All right. We just know we probably want to stay out of this because it's going to come at a cost of the hip, which we already measured.
Okay.
What's your favorite like butt exercise?
It'd probably be like single leg glute bridges or something like that.
Let's go try it.
Foot on the box, 90 breathing with a.
So you could, right? You could still go after that. But let's try because I like kind of like your idea of your single leg glute bridge, right? Let's give it a heel lift and see what happens. Because that if I can promote. We'll go with the right leg first, right? So if I'm here and I go up, how many you want me to do? You want me to do a hold or you want me to do reps?
You're so good. So let's do reps. And start with 8.
Okay. All right. So I felt my butt cheek doing work. Retest it. Retest it. See what happens. So you can bring this up. Yep. So that would be internal rotation. Push it out. Yep. Yeah. So you're gonna keep pulling this and turn that. Yeah. And is it any better? Still the same. Feels a little looser.
Yeah.
Try internal rotation.
Right here.
Yeah.
And now you can probably go here.
That is it. So hey, if you can get 10 degrees every time, that's pretty good. So it worked. All right. So let's try.
Do you think the more effect is the heel raise on that? Or
Yes.
do you think it is in that
Right.
I feel like I've learned a lot in the last few years of just how much heel lifts.
Correct. So all right. You know what? Let's hang on. Hey, did you guys get something to work?
Maybe a little.
Awesome. Did you guys get anything to work? Okay. So as soon as you try something, retest it and see if it worked. Okay. And then at 1:48, we'll come back and we'll start talking about them. Okay. All right. So Beth, let's retest this one quickly, and then we'll do our single leg glute bridge on the other side and see if it changed it. All right. So do your hip ER and IR. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay, and then try the other side. Yeah. I mean, that's tight. Doesn't feel like the other side when we did the. All right, so now we'll roll this up. All right, we'll go 8 again. Whew, I can feel my hamstring cramping up on me, which probably isn't what we want. So what'd you think?
I feel like
Feels looser.
yeah. Still.
I don't get as much pressure.
Yeah.
All right, so
You don't have as much pressure.
it didn't feel like it was as much pressure.
Okay.
All right, so but you noticed a difference. Awesome. Right, so that's sometimes all it is like, cool, let's just elevate a heel. Let's maybe put them in a different position, and we can still recapture that range of motion. Again, if I was someone that
What
maybe...
is that just basically just awakening some muscles that weren't right there and now like...
So you have to, so think about this, right? If I'm trying to open up this posterior side, right? By elevating a heel, I have to put pressure in a different space. By putting pressure in a different space, other things can move and contract and relax, right? For me, because I'm typically stuck in a little bit more of a mid-propulsive state, I need the early propulsion. That's why the heel lift allows me all of a sudden to go from like a squat that looks like this.
So if you've done it, the other thing, have you done it with,
Okay? And it just gives me a little bit more ankle that then allows me to move things a little bit differently. Right? Yes, you can say you're awakening stuff up, right? You could do it with maybe the same thing with like a stim unit, but I don't think you'd get the same effect as it being able to actually move and change pressure gauges in different spaces, right?
People always squat and do everything on a...
So here's the thing, like, yeah, there's like, I would say probably 75% of our, maybe even 80% kids all squat with a heel wedge.
Okay.
Only because it just looks so much better.
And so, okay, when you have them just like doing things like like a lot of people like pick up things wrong or do whatever, so you just tell them just like be more like toe based when they think about that. Is it like a wedge, if a wedge was there then? Like...
So I will say this, right?
I don't know.
What gives us a much better return is like if I'm trying to hinge and get a posterior shift, toe lift is going to help us with that. If I'm trying to get more of like a squatty squat and I want things to kind of push forward a little bit, heel wedge will give us that.
Yeah.
And in most cases, what we're playing with now is like if I really want to bias maybe inter-rotation, I can put something on the edge, and now I've got the foot pronated, which will help drive that as well.
Yeah, I guess I was just saying like applying this to like life afterwards, like people I feel like with stupid injuries and stupid mistakes, like lifting up boxes and something. So if they're always doing something on a wedge and they don't have that. Like,
so here's the thing is, it should give them more variability to handle that, and it won't break them because they have more excursion, even though they may not be able to do it without the wedge.
Yeah.
Like, so let's put it this way. If I can squat with an 80-pound kettlebell with a wedge, and then I go to pick up a 50-pound box, but I have to kind of get down and do this, I should have enough resilience in the tissue to handle that because it's not completely, like, but if I can't, like let's say I only squatted with a 50-pound kettlebell to here, and then I have to get all the way down, and I got to pull that back up, it's kind of like, yeah, you're not going to survive that. Right? All right, guys. Let's bring it back. Woohoo! You know. All right. So, what did you guys find?
Well, she did some bent over.
Cable flies.
Not with weights.
Okay.
And she might have gotten a little bit, but I mean.
Nothing notable.
Nothing notable.
Did it hurt?
We did Did it hurt? I don't think it hurt.
no, it didn't hurt either time.
Okay. All right. So, what does that tell you?
She needs to do more, and she needs to practice her breathing. No.
So, was that a good?
I mean, to me, like, I wouldn't expect to see a huge change in one visit either. I mean, it wouldn't be something that you maybe need to do a few times before you're able to assess whether or not it's going to help.
It could.
Okay.
Right. And I will say this: it is hard sometimes to find the right stuff. For brands, it can be pretty challenging.
Yeah.
Right. We gotta peel back a lot of layers. Right. And here's the thing: is like that's cool. Right. It doesn't as long as it's not making it worse and we're not hurting them.
Yeah, he said it felt different.
Yeah. Like.
I felt like I went further.
Yeah.
But what I felt and what she said was maybe like that.
It was nice.
Okay, so but remember, right? That's okay. It's not the end of the world, right? As long as we're recapturing something, the more you do it, all of a sudden, if we can recapture like 5 degrees over time, and you feel good doing it, awesome. Doesn't mean we want to spend the whole like exercise program doing that, but we want to try to get you feeling pretty good, right? So we picked a single leg glute bridge with a heel elevated to try to recapture some hip extra rotation, and did it. Yes, right? And that was 8 reps. So it was noticeable, but it wasn't like anything like extravagant, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right? So awesome. Like that's an awesome warm-up exercise for them to kind of recapture some range of motion. They still get like a little bit of a training effect, and then they can keep going on throughout what they're going to do. What Beth and I were discussing is like, so does that mean like, should everybody be using a heel wedge for some of this stuff? I would say yeah, right? If it looks better and they feel good doing it, awesome. And then her next question was, well, what happens when they have to go pick something up outside of here? Like, and they don't have a heel wedge. It's like, are they going to blow up, right? Well, hopefully not, right? If I can train somebody to squat with a heel wedge and get all the way down and up and recapture range of motion, ideally, when they go to do something else, right? If they have to get down there, they can probably get most of it back and still be able to handle the load. Now, if we only took them to like here, right, because they couldn't get down without the heel wedge, by the time they have to get all the way down here, they probably have a less resilient tissue to handle that. So I would say you're always better off trying to recapture this stuff, knowing that, you know, when they go outside in life, it's not like they're in a perfect squat position and they're gonna go down and grab it. It's gonna go the way it is. If they're strong and they've been able to recapture some stuff, they're probably gonna handle it fine. Now, if they had to do it like 50 times, you know, like maybe on the 49th time, it's gonna be like, that doesn't feel good anymore. But we wanna eventually give them as many options as possible. That's what we're looking for. What did you guys find?
After playing around a little bit, when we get 90-90 breathing with some abduction, adduction, we were able to get a little bit more both active straight leg raise as well as a little bit more mobility.
IR. Awesome. All right. So ideally, what we're looking for is, can we promote some kind of change in the right direction that we think we need them to get? And then also, can this become part of their workout? Right? So in most cases, like if Beth was like, all right, I really like this single leg hip bridge for you, it might start as a warm-up. We may progress it to maybe a hip thrust off the bench with still probably a heel elevated. Or if things like work really well, maybe then we don't have to use the heel elevated anymore because we recaptured it and now we can utilize it and stuff like that. Eventually, this thing is always oscillating back and forth, right? The stronger I get, it's going to push me towards like compressive forces, and I may need to come back to more expansive stuff, right? And the more deconditioned I get, maybe I need to come back and get more compression. So it should be like a moving target to some degree. I know for myself, to maintain a lot of this stuff, I have to do the same things over and over again because I still lift heavy weights, right? And it's not like I'm not going to magically all of a sudden, like we saw in my hips today, like they're symmetrical, but they lost a good amount of range of motion. After maybe soreness goes away and I kind of do some other stuff, it may come back pretty easy, but I'm going to go back and do a heavy leg lift again when I feel good, and it's going to lose it again. So at some point, I'm probably going to have to spend some time doing things that are going to recapture that, which might mean a lot less weight, going all the way down in like a front squat position with a heel wedge, or like sometimes what really helps me is doing my lift in my Olympic lifting shoes. Right, so I've already got the built-in heel, and all of a sudden I can do my lunge and do this and really get that foot out there and feel okay. Whereas if I tried to do it with just my regular shoes, like that's as far as I can get. And I'm like, all right, now I'm pushing the limit. But with my heel wedge, I can kind of get out a little further. And it's like, all right, I've kind of recaptured some of that motion. Right? And just doing that from like my butt like hurts. Right? So this stuff it is pretty complicated, right? But the more you do it, the more you're going to be like, all right, at least it points me in the direction to pick something kind of right away and throw it at there and see what happens. And you might be surprised. And like next time, we'll go over some of the stuff that we use like on a regular basis to change some of these things, like the right side lying adductor pullback, or maybe like a bent over cable fly, or like a 90-90 breathing, right, to kind of do this stuff pretty quickly. And then you'll be like, oh, now I kind of see why this might work. What else kind of fits that narrative or fits the same kind of boxes that I can use? Because sometimes that stuff doesn't work. And then I'm like, okay, now I got to really use my brain, right? And then it forces you to be creative. And there's things like there is no wrong exercise. If it doesn't change anything, probably not our best one to choose. But if it doesn't hurt at all, I could probably still use it. I might use it for something else though. Okay? Good? Any questions? Pick one. Pick one. We got 5 minutes.
Okay, so questions like for me, I don't have IR.
Yes.
I'm thinking I need IR because I need to be able to get this for my swim stroke.
Yes.
The question is, if I do that, am I losing stability and am I putting myself in a worse position if I've got more IR but I don't have the strength?
Does it hurt?
What?
Does it hurt?
When I'm doing it now, no, but I want, like, my catch is not as good, like I don't have as much IR in my swim catches.
He has full extra rotation?
Just about.
Maybe recapture the extra rotation.
Okay.
Right? Because if you, again, it goes back to the idea, this is the hard part. If I have strategies on both sides that are limited, right? Sometimes, again, you can use the infrasternal angle to maybe take an educated guess, be like, oh, they're already biased towards compression, which you're wide, correct?
Wide.
Right, so he's already got probably some compressive forces on the front and back. Does it matter which one we go after first? I don't know. Sometimes, I mean, Bill Hartman would probably know better than I would, but I don't. He'd probably maybe say, like, all right, go after something on the posterior side, okay? But if we were to look at it from the archetypes that he's talking about, a wide is a inhaled compensation on an exhaled axial skeleton, right? Which means I've got more of a bias towards this like compressive force, and to get out of it, I'm trying to open up, right? So for me, who is a narrow, I've got an inhaled axial skeleton with a compressive compensatory strategy on top of it, right? So what you, in both cases, you still probably need to loosen up this posterior side, and then usually sometimes go off to the front side. But in other cases, we're probably looking at it's got to whatever you can do really well, right? The one thing I will say is the more and more I see it, if you can't restore breathing excursions, so if that ISA doesn't really move, you can check stuff like, so we have a girl who I'll have them blow up a balloon, and it sounds like this, right? It's like, they can't relax, right? They do not know how to breathe in through their nose, get a full exhale, pause for a second, not feel like they're under threat, and then go in through their nose again. And that is probably like another red flag, is like, if I put them under any stress, they're going to go into this very kind of compensatory breathing strategy, which again orients all this stuff very differently. So sometimes we may not even start with a bent over cable fly to restore this. I just need to be able to get her to actually take a full breath in and then a full exhale out. And that's where, like, we used to do a lot more balloon breathing because it helped identify some of that stuff and it helped them get that full breath out. And I stopped it because I was like, I don't really know what this is doing. But now that we have cases that are a little bit more like, man, we've tried all these little things, nothing's working, and then you test that and you're like, yeah, that's probably why, right? And we're probably missing the boat on some of this foundational level stuff, and we got to go back and reinvest in that.
So is that if, like, when you're checking their ISA, like they don't have dynamic?
Yes, if it doesn't move.
It's either out, or just stuck in.
So I would say, our athlete that's like this, I mean, you see her walk around, she's kind of like this, right? And you'll be like, hey, how you doing today? She's like, I'm all right. Right, and you can just see it. She doesn't exhale, and she's just stuck in this very inhaled state. And also in a lot of pain, right? We can't, for some reason, her knees, no matter what, and her shoulders, everything just does not want to do stuff. And you would think for someone that's up here and expanded would have more range of motion, but she's limited in a lot of them too, right? And it's probably because she can't fully get air out, so she's got kind of compressive forces on both sides to hold her in place. Again, we're just starting to balloon stuff, and it's starting to kind of get better, but we just got to be patient with it too. So in some cases, like what you're saying, Denise, like she's probably just got to do this over and over and over again until we start to see this kind of pattern emerge, and she can figure it out too. Any other questions? Good, let's finish there.